Hi, my name is Elijah, and welcome to my podcast, Songwriting for Songwriters. My special guest this week is Shaun from UK hip-hop act The Scribes. We speak about hip-hop, his influences, what it's like writing so many words, the vocal impact of being a hip-hop artist, his relationship with his brother-in-arms Johnny, narrative storytelling and songwriting, and loads more. So please do subscribe, check out this podcast, share it with friends, and thank you very much for being here. Joining me today on my podcast, Songwriting for Songwriters, is Shaun from The Scribes. How are you doing, Shaun?
Yeah, all good. Thanks for having me on. How are you? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, mate. So I had the absolute pleasure of doing the sound for you the other day, and I was really amazed by your show and performance. And I also had that experience where I didn't know your work before that night. So I had one of those rare musical experiences where you get to hear like a new act that you've not heard before kind of deliver their set. And I was blown away at how good it was and what you're doing. So thanks for a great show, first of all. The interplay between you two, how long have you known each other as musical partners?
Oh, we've been best friends since we were 5.
Wow.
Like we went to primary school together. I think Johnny, the other rapper in the group, was the first guy who showed me around primary school when I first went there.
Okay.
Like as in when I went, because I was young for the year, so started in January instead of in September.
Right.
And I think it was Johnny. He was certainly my best friend by the end of the first year at school. And
Amazing.
we stayed best friends for forever. Musically, I think when we both vaguely started getting into music, it was always gonna be with each other because I think we sort of did most things together or got into most things together. I don't think we necessarily made a conscious decision to make like a group until much later, but I think I'd say we started dabbling with music and with rap and with little bits of production and mainly with writing raps and that together from from when we first started, maybe like 14, 13, something like that. Like not in any kind of serious way then, just in a kind of game sort of way. We used to do it at like house parties and stuff, freestyle and bits. So it was much more of a game that you did at a house party then than it was a sort of career or anything, you know.
So that's a really deep connection. It's like a brother connection, isn't it? That kind of level of friendship. It's a deep thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really nice. It's been really nice to do everything that we've been lucky enough to do together. So it's the amount of time that we're on the road together as well. I'm not sure I could have done it with anyone else. I'm not sure either of us would have made it through, no matter how well it's going. Those drives are sometimes like long,
Yeah.
and especially if it's not gone particularly well, and you've got like a 6-hour drive ahead of you.
Yeah.
But because it's us, yeah, I'm not sure I could have done it with anyone else, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, it's when you're in a band, isn't it? It's like, or an act. It's like it's a very unique relationship. The people you're with, it's like you go through a lot. You know, so I always think it's a bit like being being at war with an army troop because you go through so much stuff together that it's like a very bonding relationship as well.
Yeah, you do, and stuff that's quite like niche to explain. It's quite the like I say, if you've, especially when you're starting out doing things and it's going okay, but you're past the point where it's like you're kind of starting to want to get money for it and bits like that. And you're at that point when you start doing things that are to up the name, and this is a long time ago now, really, but when you start doing things to like get your name out and explore into new areas and do things like that. So you're doing things for next to no money or no money, and you're kind of hyping each other up for it, and that goes badly. And then you got to drive back for 6 hours, and you both kind of, everyone in the group knows that that was not what you'd hoped it would, and knows that there's not really the upside of a particularly large remuneration for it. And it's those are the times when it feels like war, and that's something that you don't share with a lot of other people. That kind of low after the
It's
after
true,
the
though.
excitement.
It's true because that when you've like you say when you've like done a show or something or you've been led to believe something could be cool and it's not gone well for whatever reason, having to kind of find that positivity again or optimism or regroup the group, the kind of a space of faith is quite something, isn't it?
Yeah. I think that's when I would have that's when I would have struggled the most with anybody else apart from Johnny, was that kind of phase when we were younger, but probably at a point where we definitely wanted to be getting money. It definitely was at a point where you were doing this show over probably a better paid show, but on the premise of something bigger coming out of it, or that being a gateway to something big, and it goes so badly for whatever reason that you know it's not going to become that. And then it just,
Okay.
yeah, I think times like that when I was very glad that I was doing it with my best friend rather than anybody else.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So when you guys make music together, I mean, it's so unique and refreshing and vital, the sound that you got.
Oh, thank you.
How do you go about creating, how does the track start and where do you come from?
It's we've got different. So I produce about half our stuff. Some of it's other producers, like we've got Astro Snare from Oxford. We're in the middle of a series of EPs that we're doing with guest producers.
Right.
So the last one was with Vice Beats, who's Bristol based, and the third one's going to be with Cut Beals, who are from Finland. So when it's them, it's much more of a we will write. We'll be given the music. We'll structure. We'll generally be sent like a piece of or a selection of pieces of music that the producers have made, and we will go right. That's the hook. That's what we want for this section. That's what for this section. We'll write it, send it back to them, and they'll restructure. And we tend to write for things like that choruses together, or sometimes both write a chorus and let the producer decide, and then the verses will go off and do individually, like
Okay.
entirely separate. Really, once the chorus is there, once the chorus has set sort of the tone and has set the topic and has set the mood, once we've decided that together, we'll then go off and do verses separately. If it's something that I've produced, that will have a lot more input musically, that there'll be much more time in the studio where we'll sit there together and mess about on. We tend to use a lot of synths and guitar bits, so we'll sit there messing about on those sort of together
Okay.
until something comes up, and then to go through the same process. But it's pretty much always music first for us in general. We might have a topic we want to write about, but until the music's there, we won't have written to it. They do tend to be separate things because rap's so dependent on uh, the tempo that
Yeah.
it's hard to write separately. Because then if I sit and write, yeah, we always tend to have music to write to because it's very difficult. We will know vaguely we want to do a song about this, and then we'll wait till we find the piece of music or make the piece of music that fits with that. Then we'll do the actual writing.
Well, so like music for, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's so dependent on the, like you say, the tempo and the tone of it, I suppose. So when you're
Yeah.
like writing individually and you bring that together, do you edit each other's work, or is it a kind of
Not, we wouldn't ever directly like veto or directly go no to something.
no?
But again, because of our relationship being so good, we both know how to make it clear to the other person if maybe we don't think that's the best line in the world.
Okay.
And then the other one will almost certainly pick up on that, and it'll be changed by the next take. But there's never, it's very much each individual's decision. The choruses we might have a bit more of a discussion about. But in terms of the verses, we'll make each other's. If we, I think we both like what we do as well, which helps. To be honest, we both
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
the other one's very good at what they do, which helps a lot because it very rarely comes up. And when it is Johnny's verse, that is his verse. The only time we really have to talk in terms of verses is if like I say if one of us thinks something is just not good, and then we'll find a way of letting the other person know. But even then, if they, it's never so. It would always be an opinion thing rather than a factual thing. So even then, realistically, if Johnny made it clear he didn't think a line was good, but I thought it was the best thing in the world, I'd stick to it and we'd do it, and it'd go on the record, and the same in reverse.
Yeah. You know.
Um, yeah, the choruses tend to be more of a collaboration thing, and that there tends to be more. So that's why it's nice. It's easy, yeah. It's easier when it is external producers that we've just got a bit of music to. It's easier because we can just record both the things, like what I think's right Johnny thinks right, and send it to them, and they can decide,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
it's out of our hands.
yeah, yeah,
When it's our music and we've sat there and made it together, it's more difficult to do that because there's not really a third party. We might ask one of the beatboxers, but we tend to then have to um, sort of compromise. Or we, to be fair, because I do our mixing and mastering, we sometimes leave because I'll give myself like a month gap between the two because it's difficult enough to kind
yeah,
of master something you've mixed anyway. So I'd give it like a month gap of just not listening to it at all.
yeah.
And normally after we've both sat down and left it for a month and come back, we'll go, oh no, clearly that one is the better chorus option. Clearly, we just in that moment when we were in it, it was hard to tell.
That's good to have that kind of relationship with space, isn't it? And with your music, because like you said, when you're involved in it, really in that coalface situation, sometimes like an idea can feel like the most important thing, and then with a bit of space, allow it to kind of marinate in its own juices, and then come back and just
Yeah, yeah. I always think it's very hard to when you're like building bits. It's very hard to not see the bricks. Whilst like after a month or so, you come back and you see the wall, and you go, oh yeah, that's a good. Instead of it being like if last week it took me 5 hours to get down 4 bars of guitar
yeah,
in a song. I'm gonna need some space before I can listen to that song without basically just waiting for that part to come in for better or for worse. So like yeah, I think space is important to start hearing it how 99% of people are gonna hear it as a complete song, not as a stack of elements.
so
And
when
yeah,
you're
I think it's
writing, when you're
very
writing though,
important.
like how is it like when you've got a track through or when you've made a track,
Mm.
um, that process of kind of initial spark to kind of finish piece before you kind of come back to it, is that quite a
Yeah.
quick process?
Yeah, I mean it depends. It's the main issue we have we were taking a bit of time off in January and February to get some new bits done. The main issue we have at the moment really is our getting our voices in a space to do it because we especially through the summer we're doing like 3 4 a week and it gets very difficult to then find a time to record where your voice actually sounds like you want it to
Yeah, yeah,
is that's something we're kind of having to work around for the last few years now. So we tend to get most of it done in January. So it's I think if it was condensed, it would be a fairly quick process. But if we write something in February, if we get a say we sit down and make a song, we've got the topic, we've agreed on the chorus, we'll get a demo done within a week or so. But to get that actual final thing, we'll probably have to wait till January just to be in a space where our voices are capable of kind of final takes rather than it being a something that's being done where you feel a bit like, oh, I'm still feeling a little bit of strain from the last few shows, you know?
I have to say like the sheer kind of like vocal workout you guys do. I mean, I'm a singer, so you know, I am not using my voice in the same way that you guys do, but
Mm.
like but I understand how the voice works. And
Mm.
watching you guys perform, I mean, the sheer vocal workout, the speed, the velocity of the of what you're doing, the kind of precision, and also like the use of the throat. Like, is
Mm.
that a massive thing? I mean, the recovery time must be something to work at that level.
Yeah, it's difficult. We have to be careful going from show to show. There's a lot of honey and lemon and vocal zone on the road between places. There's a lot of that, but that will get us through shows. That I mean, our voice will last through those shows, and we were quite good at kind of hitting the level where we can give it our all without ruining the next show.
Yeah,
And it's nice. I think we're both comfortable to do that, and we can give it our all, not have to hold back, and just about get through sort of maybe 4 or 5 in a weekend, something like that.
well,
If it gets to more than that, it starts getting a genuine kind of we have to consider it. And when yeah, in terms of recording, you feel it for a few days after. It'll be certainly for recording anyway. It's a very different thing recording to the live side of hip hop. Like the live side of hip hop, there's a lot more leeway, and also live, we're not necessarily expecting ourselves to get through a whole take. If you've got 16 bars and they're fast, we can divvy them out between us. I can take a breath because Johnny will fill in this word or this phrase, and vice versa.
Yeah.
It's after that trying to record where we've got to get through the 16 ourselves, because on record it will be us
Yeah.
doing it. Rather than kind of leaving a gap for the other one to fill. It's that's when it gets really hard on the throat, is trying to do that after the weekends or after
Like
shows.
in like metal music, there's like a lot of speed in terms of like playing, and there's a lot of
Mm.
focus on the speed of playing, which obviously takes a lot of time to practice. In terms of the speed and delivery of the work and the precision, the timing of it, I
Mm.
mean, obviously in rap that is so important to have a good flow going. How much time did you spend as a kid, or do you spend like rehearsing that kind of precision at that speed, because it's so important?
Yeah, we don't. I think the when we were young, it was a lot of freestyling, a lot of listening to hip hop, and now it's quite natural
Yeah.
to us. I'll tend to, even now, if we're writing something, I'll tend to sort of freestyle a bit to it, not necessarily even about the topic it's eventually going to be, but just to find little flows and little vocal patterns that sit nicely with whatever's happening with the music,
Yeah.
and then sort of take rhythms rather than any particular words, but more just, oh, that sounded nice with that bit. When yeah, I tend to do that, and then put the words in after, or at least get a pattern down, and then
Yeah.
get the first line down, and then from there it'll kind of feed off the initial pattern. And in terms of each other, we don't like, as in finding each other's timing and stuff. We don't really rehearse that much because the shows are so frequent. If we're doing, when we bring in a new song, we'll probably just spend that drive sort of getting through it and figuring out where each other are going to need each other to come in and do bits, and what backings are going to sound nice. And then we just tend to sort of road test it, really, kind of just
Yeah.
do it in shows,
Yeah.
get out there, and then it kind of gets together pretty tightly. But then, like I said, it's been so long now, we know each other's flows and voices pretty
Yeah.
well. I think we're pretty solid at knowing what tricks each of us likes, what flow each of us tends to go towards, and what thing, if a word's being extended, how long each of us is likely to extend it, so we can nail each other's backings. I think we're that kind of comes pretty naturally now, which helps a lot.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, that's true of all acts, isn't it? And bands where like you just have that second sense, like you know what each other's going to do. That's the joy of kind of being super tight, is that you can just flow with that, and it's very easy.
Yeah, that's definitely something that just comes with time. I think it's the main thing, because we get a lot of, or we try to, wherever possible, get support acts that are, or at least one of the support acts being like a local sort of young person, because it was difficult for us when we were in Bristol, which was pretty good scene for it, but
Yeah.
it was still, hip hop was still a hard sell for venues and clubs, so
Mm.
especially when you were just starting off,
Yeah.
and it was difficult to find places that would sort of have you. And we wanted to try, and we still want to try, and wherever possible, get local people, especially if there's somewhere not that's not like Bristol. Like now, we're lucky enough to go and travel a fair distance with it and get around a bit. And some of the places we all end up playing, there's not necessarily big sort of spaces for local hip hop acts to perform in.
Yeah.
So we would try and get kind of young up and coming people, and make sure that they're at least given a slot or something, so they can get out there and practice it. Because it's important to practice it, and it's never the same doing it in your room. And the main thing I noticed from like our performances, when I watch back footage of us when we were young, and from anyone young sort of doing things, is the little bits like big bits of silence we try and avoid, like when there's just a song just stops and it just ends. And the tightness of it, there's a lot of really talented people out there, but without the time put in, you don't get that tightness. It does need to be sort of road tested and really checked, and really put time into doing it in a live environment, because I don't think it's ever quite the same as doing it in a practice space or in
No.
your room. And I
Yeah.
don't think there's any way of getting that other than just putting time in
Yeah.
and getting time in front of audiences and time in front of crowds. So we do try and provide that for sort of young, like up, I say, like sort of any up and coming act in the areas wherever we can do.
Fantastic. Now, as a writer songwriter myself, like lyrics are obviously massively important, and in this kind of music I make, it's like there's obviously a chorus or two or three and a couple of verses, but the amount of lyrics is quite is not that many, or even, and it takes me a while to really be perfectionist about what I'm saying. But in terms of hip hop and what you guys do, is masses of lyrics. You know, it's masses of words. So how long does that take you? And I'm interested because for me as a writer, like the shapes, I feel like melodies have like an architecture and a structure, and that the sound, like you do if you're scatting, the sound will kind of be a structure, and then those words will kind of fit in. And you, for my process, I kind of get out of the way to some extent and hear the shape of the sounds, and they'll kind of suggest themselves. So I'm really interested to kind of know, when you've got so much to write and the speed of the lyrics is, you know, what's your process in terms of writing lyrics and where your inspiration comes from, and how do you kind of write so much per track?
I think it depends a lot on what it is. Like, if it's sort of a live party song, then I will tend to, like say, like I'll freestyle to the beat. I'll find the patterns that I think that's nice, like something nice is happening there, and the words at that point will be borderline gibberish, or at least be very sort of. It'll be a freestyle. So I've sat there and recorded a freestyle, and I'll listen to it back and go, okay, that little rhythm there sounds really nice at this point, and this sounds like I might do that a few times just to have a vague idea of what I'm kind of aiming at, whether or what I think fits nicely with the beat, and then try and sort of work from there to get the flow of a more party song. But then also there's a much wider range for some of the kind of traditional golden age hip hop stuff. There's a wide, that's why freestyling is possible. You can freestyle hip hop because it's very, sometimes bits of hip hop like party hip hop can be very braggadocious. They can be very sort of cool and over the top and exaggerated. And it means there's a nice wide range of things that you can write. It doesn't have to be that specific sometimes. When we're writing more specific songs, like if we're doing, I did an EP with an American label last year that was all about like a breakup, or a couple of years ago about a breakup, and it's written as like an analogy. So the actual songs are just a story about somebody who has a shipwreck and then gets lost on an island and then wanders through a desert and then finds their way home. And that's like much more specific. So that had to be much more of a, I'm going to write this and then maybe adjust to the flow. So I'll write what I want to say, and then tweak the flow from there. So it kind of works the other way around for things like that. And that tends to take a lot longer. I think that takes much, or at least it takes it feels like it takes longer, because I think it's got less room to maneuver. Essentially, it's got less space to just go anywhere. Whilst like if it's a party song and the rap is mainly about like, oh, this is a great time, or look how great rap is, or whatever it's about, in a very sort of 90s hip hop style, there's a lot more freedom to kind of do what you want and say what you want. And there's, I think in rap as well, there's just an appreciation of rhyme and flow that's nice. But I do think that can I think that's a separate way of writing. Sometimes we're writing to do that. We're writing to do an impressive rhyme that sounds cool, that makes people feel good and feel like they want to dance and kind of do a screw face and bounce and all that stuff. And sometimes we're writing to express something, and they're quite different types of writing, I find, because I think like I say, the party kind of bouncing sort of bass face kind of one that's going to get a crowd up and going is more free, but a lot more focus spent on flow and rhyme and interest, how intricate that can be. And sometimes when it's expressive stuff and you need to say something, the focus is much more on the words and the actual what you're saying and what you're expressing and how that makes you feel more. It's more emotive, I think, when it's like that, and less kind of less sort of brash and more introvert and less kind of extrovert. when
Who,
it's the
who
personal.
are your like lyrical influences?
For me, my pal listened to a lot of the Kings, so I grew up listening to that, and then I got really into Blur.
Yeah,
So I do like a narrative in a song. Like I
yeah,
definitely like I've done a couple of that one. There's a on Stay Free recordings. They did like a little picture vinyl for was narrative, and I did one before on a Brighton label called Mr. Teatime and the End of the World, and that was just a 10-track story that just runs into itself about like a guy survives the end of the world, and then robots take over, and then he meets up with mutants and they fight the robots. But it's just one story, like it doesn't stop.
great.
And I really liked writing that because that felt like the sort of that I think those are the songwriters that I listened to a lot at least. And but I think those are the people that inspired that type of writing in me. I think those
Yeah,
are the people that inspired the more personal writings or the more narrative writings
yeah,
were
that's
probably Damon Albarn and Ray Davis. And then I guess for the flowy, rappy sort of more, these are the bits that are gonna get people head nodding bits. I was bang on the right age for Eminem coming through, and that was I thought he was great. A lot of the raucous record stuff, Pharoahe Monch, Talib Kweli, um, yeah, a lot of sort of underground hip hop things of that time. Because when I was growing up in the charts, it was a very gangstery
yeah,
hip hop and very clubby hip hop, which wasn't really my thing, and I found it hard to relate to. I was more into the sort of underground MCs that were a bit more conscious, a bit more honest, maybe.
yeah,
And also for my hip hop and what an MC is better. I thought they were better. I thought they were better at rapping than
yeah.
some of the sort of big gangstery names that were maybe doing slightly more club friendly music. So things like people like Pharoahe Monch and LP. Um, they were all the sort of thing that was like, okay, cool. That's cool. That's the sort of level of rapping I want to be, or at least the sort of direction of
Yeah.
rapping that I want to do when I'm doing those types of songs.
It's really interesting to hear that. Like, I think it's so I think what makes sometimes an artist unique is the influences they've kind of soaked up, and sometimes that can be really like a small thing, like just
Mm,
one track you've heard once when you were six can be a massive influence even though you've just heard it
yeah,
once. But to hear about your like love of those more like narrative writers, because like Ray Davis and Damon Albarn, I mean they're incredibly good at kind of noticing the world around them actually, but also
mm,
writing from a personal way, which does have a narrative. I mean, Damon Albarn particularly is like amazing at
mm.
sort of being personal within a narrative. It's very, very sort of
Yeah,
it's one of his moves.
yeah. I think a lot of the stuff is yeah. I think I always liked that as a method of getting something across when it's essentially like an allegory or like a it's a story about somebody, but it's representative of a much larger
Yeah,
thing. Like especially the earlier Blur stuff, the like Modern Life is rubbish, and even on to like The Great Escape, they were very much like they're very much that. So many of those songs are like called a person, are called like Steve,
yeah,
and the Kinks as well. So many of those things are called like Tom Bloggs, and Tom Bloggs is just a mundane man who lives in and goes to work and hours. And really, it's talking about
yeah,
like city life or being in a 9 to 5, whatever it's talking about. But I really liked that style of storytelling and that method of expressing something. I always did like that. That's again, that's tends to be for more uh, personal things or more
yeah.
narrative things. I'll think of that as an inspiration because
How
it's
much of you you're like your own feet? Like, obviously, if you're writing a narrative and using characters, and those people
mm,
doing that, how much do you think of like your feelings, your kind of soul feelings are in that when you're writing
I
that
think
way?
it can vary a lot. Like I think the last one, the shipwreck one, that was just me. That was purely me going through a breakup and needing to express it,
Yeah,
and that narrative working for me as a framework. I was like, okay, yeah, cool. I liked it. I think, to be honest, what I like about that is like at the time that I wrote it, the breakup had happened, and I was sort of a bit lost, but I knew it was going to be okay. And I think like the right kind of showed that the first song was the shipwreck feels very solid and like it's happened. And the lost one was, and then the later ones when in the story he's found his way home felt very hopeful, more kind of optimistic and unknown,
Yeah.
just because of where I was sort of midway the story that was me. I was only midway through myself at that
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it felt nice to write it. It felt nice to write the sort of future bit of the story, which was him
Yeah.
finding his way home, and I think that helps me a lot. But I do quite often like writing is what I'll do to process a lot of the time, and it's yeah, it's definitely helped me through a lot of things in life. I think it's a nice way of putting something down,
Yeah.
kind of
It,
drawing a line under something essentially.
definitely. Is reading important to you as an artist?
Sorry, is
Is reading important to you, like language,
oh
other
reading.
language?
Yeah, I read a lot. I've always yeah, I read a lot. I've always read a lot, and I yeah, I don't know if it's in yeah, I don't know to be honest. Like I've never really correlated the two specifically. I mean, it definitely will do because I do read a lot, and so that helps. There's a lot of uh, I guess, I guess a lot of words. I guess it doesn't ever hurt your vocabulary to read a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever particularly because it's obviously we're talking like it's not writing a novel. Even when I've sat down and done a 10-track record that's one continual narrative, if I wrote that down, that's still not even a short novel. Do you know what I mean? I'm not sure
Yeah.
there's many ways of I'm not sure there's many bits of books that I've read that I've gone, oh, that's like this book's great and I like it because of this or because of that. It's a much longer there's a much longer period of time that a novel has to tell its story than I ever will writing a song. And I don't think I've ever um, kind of borrowed a turn of phrase from it, but I might be doing that subconsciously. Trying it's I think it helps in rap having a nice a sort of a good idea of different idioms and phrases
Yeah.
is always nice because that's always a nice way of catching the ear a little bit, and
Yeah.
if and
Yeah.
it's a nice way of contrasting. It's a nice thing to contrast with.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if it particularly ties back. I'm sure it does in those ways. I think it's probably helps the vocabulary. It helps the thing, but I don't think necessarily I'd sit and write a narrative
Sure.
song
Yeah.
and be directly thinking to myself, oh, it was cool the way that this book
Yeah.
told a story. I
Sure. Sure.
wouldn't
Sure.
kind of do that, you know?
Yeah. More of a subconscious kind of influence, if at all.
Yeah, yeah. So and a very yeah, and just in the way of absorbing that many words probably leaves more words in your brain and helps with turns of phrase and kind of bits like that.
Brilliant. So I've got a couple of questions actually from a friend of yours, but also a fan of yours, Lewis. And so I just thought I'd ask
Oh
you
yeah.
um, a couple of questions from him, which are: how do you find the balance between family and gigging? Is that a difficult thing?
It's yeah, it's strange. Like I've got a 10-year-old boy, and it's really nice because I'm there most of the week.
Yeah.
So like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday when he's got clubs and bits. Yeah, when he's got like clubs and bits, I'm there, which is nice. Obviously it's away at the weekend a lot. I've but also like a lot of the time we tend to try and get home. Like it means more
Yeah.
driving, but we very rarely stay over anywhere. To be honest, even if it's the other side of the country, we'll try and do even if it's like a 6 7 hour drive.
Yeah.
We'll try and do it that night just to get home, and then at least one of us can be back. It's nice a bit older now, so like last not this summer, last summer. The first gotten to the first couple of festivals, and that was nice. It's really nice for him to be able to experience things like that in a very comfortable way as well. Because obviously we got like a little sort of backstage area, if it does get a bit overwhelming or if it does get a bit much, it's a nice way for children to experience that. Then he's got a little kind of safe space that he can get to. And he's really enjoyed it. We've been very select about which ones he's gone to. He hasn't gone to any of the big ones, and maybe that'll be something for the future. But yeah, he did it last summer, and he was very up for it this summer. So it's nice, but it helps a lot that it's like I think it made a big difference when it was a job that meant then it was when it was like a full-time job. Like that's nicer. Like now it's been like that for a fair few years now, and that made it a lot easier when it wasn't that plus work in the week or some work in the week.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a lot once it becomes a full-time thing, it gets a lot easier with the family balance because there are downsides, but then there's plenty of upsides as well. You know, you can make especially in the summer holidays, it's great then because even though I'm away a lot at the weekends, or for most pretty much all the weekends in the summer because of festivals and that, Monday doesn't really make that much difference in the summer holidays because the children are home anyway. So it does mean you gain that time. It's sort of earlier in the week, which is nice. That means we can plan things kind of around it. So it's
Yeah.
not too bad apart for as long as it's difficult. Like sometimes I'm knackered, but I can kind of power through and then take a day of rest on Monday or something.
You brought
But
something
yeah,
you brought something up there which is quite important, I think, which is like for anyone who's kind of looking out to kind of make music their career or livelihood, if you like.
mm,
Um, that leap between the kind of like job thing to making it your full-time thing, that it does take some faith, doesn't it? And does take a lot of work to get to that point.
yeah, it
Speak to
takes a
your
lot of
experience there.
faith. What I think we built up to a point where we had a nice career, built to a point where we'd sort of whittled down work as much as we could. And then because it's quite a while back now. We've been well, full time for a fair bit, which is nice. But when we first did it, we kind of whittled down as much as we could, so we were doing the minimum amount of hours we could get away with at a job.
Yeah.
And then got to the point where we, on top of that, had like 3 months ahead, like booked in. I think we were 2, 3 months. Like we couldn't take any more bookings for the next 2, 3 months, and that felt like a good time to sort of do it, to kind of give it a go. Because it meant we did have that kind of safety blanket. We had that amount of time to find other bits, but it was hard to begin with. I think that's really it was, well, I don't know about other people's experience, but for us, our income is 98% based on performing live.
Yeah.
So it does mean that's what we've got to focus on. And for us, and if I imagine for most people who are looking to make a living from music through live performance, the bigger gap you've got, the better you can be so much more discerning. Like but when lockdown happened, that helped us a lot, I think, because we got by okay in lockdown, and when we came out of lockdown, it came out in festival season when it first unlocked. So we had all the gigs we had booked, all got postponed. And then festival season when it opened, so they got postponed again because we had to do the first couple of months was just festival gigs. And it meant I think we went into festival season booking sort of 3, 4 months in advance, maybe 5, and came out of festival season now where we book about a year in advance. So like right now we're taking bookings for next October and stuff, and it makes it so much more comfortable being that far ahead because you can be a bit more discerning about it. I
Yeah.
think that's the thing with that first leap is it's very difficult to leave money on the table at that point. It's very difficult to, if your next available date is like 2 months away and somebody comes in and wants that date but they haven't got the money that you'd like, it's very hard to say no. Do
Yeah.
you know, if that date looks like, oh, if I don't, when you're in a position where it feels like if I don't say yes to this, there's a pretty good chance we're going to end up with no show on that date. And that's worse than a show that's paying half what we'd like.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But when it's sort of a year in advance, you feel more confident that if you want to fill that date, you're gonna fill it, and probably won't have to worry too much about the money. So I think that's a big part of it. But I think you've got to be you got to be very sensible about it. Do you know what I mean? There's gonna be times where you've got, there's gonna be times where you feel like famous when you're not, or times when you feel like you're definitely gonna make a mistake. Because it varies, doesn't it? Especially
Yeah, yeah,
when you're kind of coming up and you're, especially when you're doing a lot of things like support slots or bits like that, because they can definitely inflate an ego, to be honest, like quite easily. If you get on a support tour with somebody that's doing really well,
yeah,
and you do a few nights with crowds that are really excited to be there because this is their favorite artist about to be on, I think it's easy for people to get in, maybe inflate egos and maybe jump a bit too soon and go, well, of course, no way I'm going to go back to a
yeah,
call center
yeah,
on Monday. I've
yeah,
just done like 4 O2s in a row.
yeah,
But realistically, if those O2s weren't paying you that much money and they were by a million times the biggest shows you've done that year, that's probably not the representative week to kind of base it on. We tried to get to a point where our worst month, like of a year, would be enough to pay the bills before we stopped doing other before we stopped doing other bits.
I think you've done
Well,
a
stopped
really
doing.
good job of that, of balancing that, from what I can sort of what I've heard from other people and how hard you guys work. Another question from him is that your hip hop live show pays respect to the old school hip hop style nicely, well crafted rhymes delivered on time. Do you follow any new artists or styles like grime and UK rap drill?
A little, like a little bit, like very much. When like I said, we when we were growing up and we were starting off doing the rap as sort of a game and stuff, that was very much more the lyrics and the style that was inspired by the rappers that we liked more than the sort of story writing people we were talking about earlier. And then we got to tour with a few of them, a few of the kind of what we got like with Kill Jurassic 5, with Ugly Duckling, kind of acts, and all of their live shows were unlike anything we'd seen because that felt like a step up to us. At the start,
Yeah,
we were in our city supporting other English hip hop acts, and English hip hop had a scene at the time, a great scene, but it wasn't close to the numbers that an American act would pull in most of the time.
yeah,
Um, and also, it was a very different thing. The English acts were doing more laid back, more conscious hip hop that was maybe a bit more stonery sometimes and things like that. So it was more of a delivery thing. The American acts that we saw were being MCs. They were like controlling a crowd. They were turning these gigs into like block parties and things like that.
yeah,
And that when we first toured with that and saw people do that, we're like, oh, that's the stuff. That's brilliant. Like that was what we wanted to do, and it's helped us a lot really because I think we're slightly removed from a lot of uh English or UK hip hop things. We tend to be a bit more upbeat, a bit more maybe lively at times, and we've kind of carved our own niche, which has served us quite well. But in terms of listening to new stuff, we'll see support acts now. A lot of the time will end up being more towards grimy stuff because I just think that's what young up and coming people are looking at and what they tend to be doing. And it's yeah, I've not really listened to that intently to any of it, and I do tend to the context I see it in tends to be a live thing.
yeah,
So if somebody's playing a ukulele but they've got the crowd going, I'll go. That was great. It didn't really occur to me whether I then listen to that ukulele music after that point. And if somebody's got the best music in the world, but it's killed the crowd, I probably would go, oh, that wasn't so great from my point of view. But then that's because I'm seeing it in that context, and all I'm really concerned about is like, oh, I hope that this goes well with the crowd. I hope this person
yeah.
gets on well with the crowd and bits. But we played Wireless this year,
Great.
and that's very I would consider that to be very sort of grimy and trappy. But we didn't stay for very long, so I didn't see much of it. Um, but it's definitely got a big scene around it. It's not something that I'm particularly tempted to make because it's not really something that I don't dislike it. The other guys are better. They tend to listen to a lot more new music than I do. But it's not appeals to me enough for me to go, oh, I want aspects of that in our
Yeah,
sound. Do
yeah,
you know what I
yeah,
mean? This is more something that I'll listen to and go, oh yeah, that's cool. And I can see where hip hop's gone, and I will personally probably always prefer hip hop, but I it's not Yeah, it's not something I dislike or anything. It's just not something I've ever really sat down. I don't really have enough time to listen to hip hop stuff. I don't have as much time to listen to hip hop as I'd like, let alone kind of other things. So it's very fleeting. Like, the other guys are much better at keeping up to date with it. But even them, I think will tend to be hearing bits that artists they liked have kind of merged into it rather than necessarily listening to new stuff. It's not that far removed. I don't think that you can see where the foundations of it are.
Yeah.
And I did spend a long time. I did get quite interested in mixing some of the just stuff when it's got like massive 808s and the amount of space that needs to be sculpted for those to hit like they do. And that's, to be fair, that's something that's we like probably started integrating into production a little bit, is the idea of uh the sounds used in a lot of it are so selected to leave space or to function while leaving space, because the amount you listen to some of those mixes, or some bits of it, the amount of space that's being left for those 808s is massive, and everything's built around that, and it is a nice sound. Do you know, it's a cool sound. It sounds good. It sounds nice in a club as long as the PA is sort of beefy enough to kind of bring that bass through. And I think I found it quite interesting from a technical music kind of standpoint, more than I found it like, oh, that's something I want to incorporate or something that I really want to go home and listen to. But then that's probably more reflective of how much time I get to listen to stuff than it is of anything else.
Great answer, man. Thank you. Um, in terms of giving advice to songwriters or hip hop artists, so let's say like this new writers that are interested in hip hop or forging a way forward of hip hop,
Mm.
what advice would you give those kind of new writers?
I think we used to have rhyme pads. Now we got like phones. Like, I think writing down everything you think of, even if it's not a rap at that point, like I'll write down if something's like caught my ear, I'll tend to write down like maybe a phrase, or if I've just thought of something that I think's nice, like whether I think it's just a nice way of expressing something or a nice metaphor for something, I'll tend to jot it down, not necessarily in a rhyming format, but and then just if I need to write, have a little look through that. Um, I freestyle a lot still. I'll still spend a lot of the time just wandering about, sort of rapping to myself, like in my head, or like like on the dog walk or whatever. I'll be sat there just doing bits, just kind of bobbing along, and sometimes bits will come out of that I like. Yeah, I think it's something that you can be doing, like, or it can replace sort of like if you spend a lot of time scrolling on your phone or a lot of time things like that, it can very easily replace that with very minimal effort. It can be something you do while you're washing up, very easily, like things like that. But the important thing is to have some way of recording it, not necessarily like an audio recording, but some way of writing it down at that point, because it's very easy. They're so throwaway, they're so kind of off the top, they're so in the moment. It's very easy to forget them later and then go, oh, shit, I thought of a really cool thing earlier, and I can't remember. I thought really what I thought was a really cool line and bits. So yeah, just making sure you've always dead easy with phones now. I've just got like a notepad on my phone that's just full of that. It's just like full of a couple of lines of rap or a phrase that I liked or something that I saw that made me think of this, and just bits like that. And then it's nice to have a little sort of journal of
Yeah,
bits and pieces in case when it does come to write, you're kind of lacking in inspiration or bits. If you it's nice to have that as a kind of well of inspiration. So I'd say that helped a lot.
brilliant. When you talk about inspiration, I've spoken to like 20, I think that's his 28th or 29th episode of this, and songwriters from different genres all have like a relationship with inspiration. And
Mm.
some of them think it's just coming through them and it's like you just do the work, and some people believe that it comes from some universal consciousness and it arrives. What's your understanding or relationship with your inspiration? What would you describe it as? Where do you think it comes from?
I don't know. I think sometimes I've been, when it's a very personal thing, I've been inspired to write because I needed to write something, to vent something or express something or to draw a line under something, like we were saying earlier. I think sometimes a bit of music's made me go, oh, I want to rap on this. Like that's gonna be great. That's gonna be pounding. And then I'll kind of get hyped, like the first time you hear a song. Do you know, the first time you hear a song and you go, oh, that's yeah, that's a bit of me. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I think that'll inspire me to write sometimes. And I think sometimes there's bits that I kind of do that are slightly more measured, like I said, bits where we've sat down and made a decision to write something. But I do think even then, if we sit down, I think that's the hardest time, is if we sit down and go, okay, we've decided as a group we'd like to write a song about this topic. I think then that's the longest that it takes to find inspiration for it, because we both have sat down and go, this is something we want to write about, this is something we want to talk about, or something we want to express. And then that's the time when it becomes hardest to write the actual lyrics, because the inspiration is separate to the
Yeah.
decision to have it.
Yeah.
You can sit there and decide, oh, I want to be inspired to do this, and not necessary. I don't think you can generate it. I don't think I can generate it from within myself. I do think I need something to hit,
Yeah.
and that something might be going through the stuff I've written down recently and go, oh wow, that fits really nice with that, and then you're away, or it might be a couple of weeks later thinking of something that vague in the back of my mind that we're going to be writing about that soon, and go, oh, that's a nice way of expressing that. But I don't think I can ever dredge it out of myself particularly. I think
Great.
I have to be either in love with the song or
Yeah.
give it.
There's a feeling, isn't there? There's got to be some excitement and some feeling.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, I
wait,
think so, yeah.
thank you for your time. I really appreciate this. So let me ask you one
Yeah.
final question, which I ask like all writers. If you could have written someone else's song or someone else's track, so it was you that, it came through you, what
Yeah.
track would you pick?
I still think Stan is a brilliantly
Yeah.
written song, and it's that sweet spot for me, because it's like the marriage of those storytelling things like Ray Davis and Damon Albarn,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
very good at rapping side of Eminem.
Yeah.
So I like that. I think that's a very well written song. So probably that, I guess, in terms of lyrics, probably that, I think.
That was a big moment, wasn't it? That track, like, from, I mean, obviously, there's some big tracks in hip hop history that have kind of brought it into the mainstream, but like Eminem, particularly, obviously being white and so being accessible to a whole load of other people, that song really did kind of like land in a certain way. Was It was massive, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I think it felt very uh it felt very grown up, and it was nice. It ticked a lot of boxes for what I like in a song. Like, it was a narrative. It was really about, like, I guess, about him adjusting to fame, or realizing how crazy his fame was at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
It felt personal, even though it was a sort of a semi third person thing. And I just think it's really. I'm not even sure I like the actual song that much, to be honest. But the lyrics now, I'm like, that's. I thought that was an incredibly well done thing, because it does it. I think it really does it all. I think it's got a flow. It sounds like a good rap. It sounds like it's well done, and it doesn't sound like it's forfeited anything. It doesn't sound like it's sacrificed flow or rhyme scheme for the purpose of telling the story. And it
Right.
doesn't feel like it's sacrificed the story for the purpose of making its flow nicely. And that was a very sweet spot there. So probably, yeah, I think that's well up there. What else do I like? I guess there's some Sage Francis bits, but I can't think of anything in particular. So probably that lyrically. Uh, yeah, but I'd say that lyrically, I think.
It's a great answer. I mean, I think for me, the genius of that track, just to float off on it for a bit longer, is just his recognition of like the state of mind that the fan can get himself into, with not realizing the time frame in which this like Eminem has to answer this person, and that kind of like final verse and
Yeah,
the kind of care to this fan who's obviously on the edge is like, it's very well done. That, very clever.
yeah, I thought it was nice. It was nicely self-aware. It was, yeah, I thought it was very nicely done. Like I said, it certainly ticked a lot of boxes for what I like in a song, and not necessarily what I like, what I do like to hear, but also what I give myself a bit of a pound back for at the end of a song. Do you know what I mean? If I feel like I've written a story, if I feel like I've expressed something personal and done a narrative, I'll give myself a pound back. I think that's a nice thing. I always think that's a nice way of expressing something, because I think also it does that night where if you're putting that expression, so it leaves it more open to interpretation. Like if I'm in a song telling you I feel sad, it's very hard to take that any different way.
Yeah.
But if I'm telling you so and so's sad, then you might interpret there are different reasons why I want to tell you so and so sad and how I feel about it. So there's still more room for it. So I think it leaves it more open to the listener, and I think that's always a nice thing to have. I certainly like music where I can interpret as in my own way, and I find that quite interesting when there's that gap in music. And I think things like the narrative, the sort of borderline allegory, allow people to say something personal without
Yeah.
it closing off interpretation.
Yes, yes. I think you've hit a really good thing there. Just the end, the idea of that idea of leaving space for someone to find themselves in your song whilst you're writing your song is really important.
Yeah.
So, where can people find, if you guys and people that are listening, if you haven't checked out the Scribes, you really must go and check out the Scribes. It's an awesome sound performance and two very, very charismatic, brilliant performers who know what they're doing and are amazing. So check out my personal recommendation. But people, where can they find you online?
We are Instagram at the Scribes, facebook.com/Scribes Music, quillequips.com is the website. On Bandcamp, you can get all the merch and vinyls and CDs and stuff and t-shirts. All of our live listings will be on any one of those. TikTok at Scribes Music. We are on Twitter, but we never use it. So probably just use that to find links to the other things if that's where you are. And then yeah, any of those things. And we are touring basically all the time. So hopefully, ideally, a live show I think is the best way to experience it, because there's a lot of aspects to the live show that are hard to represent in any other environment, I think.
It's a sheer force, mate. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, man. Take care.